Jeff Darrington. I'm a volunteer here at the museum. I've been here about 7 years. Really enjoying the way things are moving and progressing here at the museum. How many people have been here before? Raise your hand if you don't mind. Okay, so pretty good. How many people have not been here before? Ah, there we go. That's a good thing to see. We love returning visitors, but we love new visitors as well. It's nice to have people showing up that have never been here and get to experience this. Starting off a show, I like to practice something that we do at some of our big shows. We only have 2 bleachers today, but I think we could probably do something pretty good today. We started doing the wave, and there's 1 year for Aquino. It was actually on the internet. I'm not saying it's going to be on the internet today, but I'd like to try to get a wave going, and luckily I have this flag, and I could point to this bleacher on this side, and when I say 1, 2, 3, start the wave on this side, I want to go from that side all the way to the end, and then all the way back. Does anybody want to participate and help out a little bit? Okay, so that's going to have to be louder. I know you can do better. So you ready? Let's go. On the right-hand side, here we go. 3, 2, 1, let it go. Okay, I know you had lunch. You probably didn't have any coffee, tea, or water. So what we're going to do is, I think where it's going to turn out better is we're going to start on this side this time. Because I think this side is going to be louder and it's going to feed the rest of the crowd. So let's start on this side, again from away, following the flag. 3, 2, 1, go! There we go. That's how we do it. So next, what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, if you can stand and remove your hats for the singing of our national anthem. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Let's get things started. I'd like to first introduce the Executive Director of the Canadian Tank Museum, home of the Ontario Regiment Museum. Send in the Sandcat. Now, this is Al Duffy, our President of the Canadian Tank Museum and home of the Ontario Regiment Museum. He can't hear me right now because I'm not talking on the radio, so I want to give him a real good welcome. He's probably not expecting this. We always get claps, we get cheers. What I want you to do is, he comes out of the vehicle, I want to scream, I better move. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Alan Duffy, President of the Canadian Tank Museum, home of the Ontario Regiment Museum.
Wow. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out here, and thank you for supporting us. And the Canadian Tank Museum wouldn't be the Canadian Tank Museum without over 200 volunteers that put this all together. So let's hear it for them. How many of you have been here before? Put your hands up. Oh, returns. We must be doing something right. This tank Saturday is a special one. It's called Evolution. And what you're going to see is how things, the vehicles, have changed over time. You're going to see a Model T Ford, and you're going to see something that's kind of replaced it significantly. And you're going to see a lot of battle tanks and how they've changed over the years. So it's quite a thing. If you like what you see, please feel free to go and get some information from our volunteer booth, because we always got room for 201 volunteers. So again, thank you so much for coming. We have a gift shop. We've got our whole other area. You see in behind, we got Knights of the Round Table battling it out, and we have some other exhibits, reenactments right behind you there. So afterwards, please feel free and wander around and check us all out. And next month, at the end of July, we have our huge show. If you like what you see, come on back at the end of July, sorry. It's a 3-day event. It's called our Aquino Tank Weekend. And we have reenactments out here. It's all Hollywood pyrotechnics, explosions. If you like bangs and that kind of stuff, this is for you. So look, this is Evolution. And last year was the first time, so this is the second time we've done this. So we want to start this with a bit of a bang. And what we've got here, because it's Evolution, we have a very old bronze cannon. And this cannon is a 9-pounder, which means the shot coming out the end of it weighs 9 pounds. The diameter, it's about close to 4 inches, but it weighs 9 pounds. It's considered a large cannon. This one was made about 1780. It's bronze. Needless to say, they don't make them anymore. And it came from Nepal, Kathmandu, Nepal. If you don't know where that is, you have to look that one up. It's all bronze, it's very ornately marked. And we're gonna have do you wanna hear this thing shoot? All right, we'll get ready. This is our armaments group that you see behind us here. They take care of all of our weapons, including our cannon. So, armaments group, prepare to fire. It's quite procedural here. Safety is the utmost. They're bringing the charge from that container. I forget the name of it. And you'll notice everyone has a job here. This is black powder. Armaments group, fire. How many of you were not quite ready for that? So, I think we should do it again. What do you think? All right, get your cameras ready this time. Now, everything they do is very procedural. Now, you can imagine if they were under fire, if this was a battle, we might go a little quicker. Armaments group, prepare to fire. See the swabbing with a wet. Make sure there's no sparks left over so they can safely reload it. again with a dry end. You see how all the gunpowder is kept at the back, behind the cannon, so they cannot accidentally set it off. Get ready. Armorers, fire! Wow, is that cool or not? Just before I wrap up my comments, I want you all to understand, we are here, we do not glorify war. That's not our mission, that's not our goal. What we do is we recognize and honor the service and sacrifice of our veterans. And that's what it's all about. Let's hear a round for our veterans. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our executive director and the MC for this show. And this is the gentleman that keeps us running and going day to day, Jeremy Blowers.
Quite a way to start.
Give me a radio today. Yeah, I'm gonna
My mic on. Everything.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay. Before we roll the tanks, having a bit of a problem here. Gonna mic. Okay, that's better. Now can you hear me? Thank you. I'm actually wearing my hearing protection, so once in a while I'm going to ask you guys to let me know that you're actually hearing me and the things that I'm about to say. So we also have some special guests here. The Ontario Regiment Museum and the Canadian Tank Museum are part of a vast network of Canadian Armed Forces museums across Canada, representing Army, Navy, Air Force, and all the services of the Canadian Armed Forces. And here, we actually have some guests who have just come from the OMMC, that's the Organization of Military Museums of Canada conference that was just held here in Southern Ontario. And where are you in the crowd? You see who's here from the OMMC? Well, welcome to the Canadian Tank Museum and the Ontario Regiment Museum. And let's have a round of applause for these colleagues from across the country. There are many military museums here in this great country that tell all the stories of our military past. Now, as Al said, this is a bit of a special show, a unique show. We usually cover a specific historical topic, a conflict, a time period. But in this show, we're going to see things that span over 100 years. We're going to look at the development of military vehicles from the First World War to the conflicts that we're seeing in the news today. So again, that's the loudest part of the show. At the end of the show, we're going to have a finale where you guys are going to see a simulated tank battle between two modern main battle tanks. That's going to be the finale of today's show. What do you guys think about that? Sounds good? Just gonna wait for the armorers to safely get off the field. Now, when you're leaving at the gates, and also plastered all over the museum, you'll see these posters with a QR code. And that's for you to fill out a survey and tell us about your experience here at the Canadian Tank Museum. we are a vastly and quickly growing organization. And it's important that we hear about your experience, how we can improve, how much you liked it, and also give us some other intelligence like how far you came or how you may have heard about the Canadian Tank Museum. Now, I'm going to ask you to please fill out that survey if you can. Yeah, but there's a prize. So from every Tank Saturday, we take one of the survey results randomly, and we send them a special package to come back to another Tank Saturday this year or in the years in the future to get a ride in vehicles with their family and free admission. Does that sound like not a bad prize, right? So remember, if you can, take the survey, let us know how we did and what we can improve to make Tank Saturdays even better. Are we now ready to see some military vehicles roll? The ground's gonna shake. Send out the tanks. So Al started the show with a bang with that ancient cannon, but our story of military mechanization starts in the First World War. Now the first vehicle in the parade, you may have noticed, was quite obviously not a tank. It was very small, but it's an important part of the story in the evolution of mechanization in armed forces. So I'm going to have the marshals send out. Marshals, send out the Model T. Even before the development of tanks, leading up to the First World War, militaries were starting to slowly mechanize. And what they were using is they were actually taking these new inventions like the automobile, like the truck, and they were militarizing them for logistics use. And what we're looking at here is a Canadian-made Model T Ford pickup truck. This vehicle was made in 1915. That means that the truck that's running in front of you is 110 years old. Right? A 110-year-old truck running right in front of you. And this was the first vehicle that we received in our growing First World War collection. Inside the Military Vehicle Conservation Center, you can actually see an M1917 light tank that we just acquired this year. We'll eventually get that running, so you can see a First War tank rolling in the tank arena. But the first thing that we got was this 1915 Model T Ford. Now, when the First World War started, the biggest single customer of Ford purchasing the most vehicles became the British Empire. Most people don't know that. Yes, I know a ton of Model Ts were sold in the United States and around the world, but it was the British Army and the Commonwealth countries that were purchasing a massive amounts of military vehicles to make their armies more mobile. And as the First World War, for the most part, became a static war in the trenches, these vehicles were exceptionally important behind the lines. They're very light. What they did is they took civilian models of vehicles. This exact vehicle was sold to companies, to individuals, to farmers, and they militarized it. And how did they do that in the First World War? Well, first off, they painted it green. Okay, a lot of military vehicles obviously are painted green, and you'll notice it's that dull green, not a glossy green. Wherever possible, they removed any of the chrome on the vehicles. That would make, this Model T would have chrome headlights, chrome lanterns. So they tried to remove as much of that chrome, and they just simply painted on the side with the arrow WD, which is for War Department. So some of the earliest military vehicles, well before armored tanks and those sort of things started to come onto the scene by 1916, which were quite a surprise to the enemy, we were purchasing thousands and thousands of these very early automobiles and trucks. Now, in the back of the Model T, this military Model T, is another important piece of early mechanization, and you'll be shocked about this. It's a bicycle. Now, the history of bicycles in combat and in conflict is not a very popular topic, but you wouldn't believe how many bicycles were used in the First World War to move troops from one position to another. Unless you're moving long distances with trains, you had to march to the battlefield or march to a new position. And this remained even the truth up until the Second World War into the 1940s. Some of the biggest victories that the Axis had in the Second World War were because of the bicycle. The fall of Singapore in the Far East, the Japanese troops all had bicycles. The Blitzkrieg, the invasion of France in 1940. How many German soldiers had bicycles? It gave them that much more mobility, and that started in the First World War. So here you can see a Canadian War Department Ford truck for bringing supplies up to the front. There's a bicycle, so a dispatch rider or messenger or an individual can move quicker along roads and paths than walking or running. And here's another small interesting fact about this Canadian Model T, because these were built in Canada as well. Now, if you look where the steering wheel is, this door seems kind of useless. Now, Frank, you're not a very big guy, but that's pretty tight for you to get in and out of this door. With the parking brake right there, right? So most of the Model Ts, for simplicity of production, the driver, not like today's cars, the driver would actually get in the passenger door and shimmy over to the steering wheel, and then their passenger would get in. But Canada was producing these vehicles for war, and was producing them for Australia, for the United Kingdom, where the steering wheel is on the other side of the truck. So in Canadian production, they put a door, even if it's useless, on both sides. So they didn't have to have special bodies for one market or the other. They just had to move the steering wheel back, and the operators would use a different door. So there are American versions of the Model T that do have doors on both sides, but that's a clue that it's a Canadian-made Model T Ford for military production. Now this is Frank driving a Model T. These are so early, 110 years ago, that they're not standard as you would drive any vehicle today, okay? The accelerator is not a pedal on the floor. Frank, show them just where the accelerator is. So can you imagine where you're changing gear with a pedal on the floor, you have a brake on the floor, and your gas is there, but also you have to figure out the timing of the engine, right? So, very early, and the beginning of our story of mechanization of warfare starts with civilian vehicles that are adapted to military use in a pre-armor era. So let's hear it for Frank and the Model T Ford. So just remember, that's a Ford. This next vehicle will start to make sense. You already saw the Oshkosh Sandcat come out. It's black. We sometimes joke that it's the executive limo of the museum. But this vehicle is also a Ford. From 100 years later, after we were using those Model Ts. On a Ford F550 chassis. And that's a Ford F550 heavy duty. So those are those large chassis, larger engine that most ambulances and other large vehicles are on. This was built particularly for military use. When the United States got into conflict in Iraq, they were looking for a new MRAV, or mine-resistant armored vehicle, and there was lots of bids, and Oshkosh came out with the Sandcat. Now the United States didn't go ahead with purchasing the vehicle, but many countries did. Some of them are, this one here was built in 2015, so 100 years after that Model T. And boy, how the technology has changed. So you can see there's a turret and a crew commander on the top of the vehicle. He's got a 50 caliber machine gun, much larger tires, off-road capability, and the vehicle is armored. Look at these almost space-like windows. The reason they bulge out like that is the bulletproof glass is this thick. And it's bulletproof glass with a plastic spall liner or bulletproof glass. And that glass is so thick that it can stop a 50 caliber round from a machine gun that big. Whereas that Model T, well, you could probably stop a baseball, coming at you in that vehicle. So these were sold to militaries. They were used in Iraq and in Afghanistan for VIP transport, moving diplomats around, protecting contractors, protecting convoys. They are bulletproof. Also in the doors, you see here, they have these pistol ports. So all the people in the vehicle actually have a pistol port where they can put their small arms weapon from inside the vehicle and fire outside the vehicle, including the additional security officers or infantry in the back of the vehicle. Now, another interesting thing that we're not going to demonstrate, you can have a look at it when it's back over in the tank harbor. They would use these vehicles, they get into a small arms fight, and they use their vehicle for cover. You don't have to worry about your legs or your feet being shot off, right, from the enemy. So a very advanced vehicle, just showing the difference in 100 years of technology of armored of trucks from the Model T Ford to the Sandcat. So we're gonna have them come around, and then we're gonna have the two of them come out so you can see them side by side. Now, the Canadian Armed Forces did not use the Sandcat, but after the conflict, there was a lot of them around, and an undisclosed Canadian security agency purchased them and then donated them to the Canadian Tank Museum. So here we go, 100 years of military trucks, both Fords, the 1915 War Department Model T Ford of the First World War, and the Oshkosh Ford Sandcat. $100 years in difference. All right, truck team, thank you very much. So let me get into the era of tanks. In the First World War, those first tanks, as you may know, were those huge lumbering land ships with 11 to 18 personnel inside them to operate. And they were not designed for fighting other tanks. They were designed to break through the stalemate of the Western Front and to get, fight infantry. So we're going to look at another very interesting vehicle, and this actually is a tank. Like the M1917 that's in the museum, the actual built in 1918 during the First World War. What you're going to see here is this is a British-built Vickers model 1936. So this is what you call an interconversion. Before the Second World War broke out, and they're based on principles of how people thought tanks would be used. And all of those principles obviously were proven wrong in 1939 with German Blitzkrieg and their use of armored forces. So the Vickers, the concept at the time in those interwar years is they wanted to have that simple tank, not those giant ones like that the British had in the First World War, but those small mobile tanks that they would pivot. We'd hopefully never get into a trench warfare situation, and they would be used like cavalry, like horses, but armored horses. They would swarm the enemy. They would move behind enemy lines. It's a two-person vehicle. You have your vehicle operator in the front. You can see the hatches up. And then you have a turret. This is the debut of the Vickers 1936. So here, it's a tank, but it's 1936. So the armor on this is actually thinner than that armored truck, the Oshkosh Sandcat, because it's really just meant for protecting the crew inside from small arms, not fighting other tanks. It's for infantry support. The British were building these tanks, and this was their lead export tank. At that time, the British had great reason to want light, small tanks. They had a huge empire to defend. So they could dispatch these on ships and armored Rolls-Royce armored cars and small Vickers tanks. And in the colonial empire, they were king. And other countries thought that this was the way warfare was going as well. The main weapon on it is a Vickers machine gun, which is like a machine gun that was used in the First World War in trench warfare. And it just has one additional crew member. At this point, most of these small tanks didn't even have radios. The crew commander would be communicating with other tanks and with infantry using flags. So this is very early in the development of armored warfare. These were obviously hugely obsolete this was built in 1936, and only 3 years later we see in 1939 the Panzer III, the Panzer IV, and tanks like the Soviet or Russian T-34 coming out. But this was the concept of armored vehicles in that interwar period. They are faster than their First World War counterparts, but they were still lightly armored for fighting infantry and maneuverability on the battlefield. Now, our crew here, and I'll just point out the driver because driver is Sam Richardson. He's actually the curator of the Canadian Tank Museum and the Ontario Regiment Museum. You can't see him there. And I'm pointing him out because he's such a busy guy being the curator. He hardly ever gets to come out here and play in the dirt. So he gets to be the driver for the debut of the Vickers. All right, so Vickers 1936, an interwar tank, an infantry fighting tank. Let's hear it for the Vickers crew one last time. Now, many countries were building light tanks like that. The Soviet Union, France, Germany. But it wasn't just Germany who was having a new concept of armored warfare and tanks breaking through and being able to defeat other tanks on the battlefield. Other countries were developing this as well, but they were just developing it slightly behind Nazi Germany. Let's look at the evolution of Russian tanks. See, Sam doesn't get to come out here very much, so he just wanted to do another lap in the Vickers. Here we go, guys. Vickers, one more time for you. It can go a lot faster than that. Obviously, we use these conditions. He's in that little 1936 tank. He's driving in a tank arena for other main battle tanks. Very quick, very fast. So it seems the T-34, it'll come out a bit later. It seems to be having a mechanical issue they're checking on. So I have to skip ahead to an actual main battle tank. So we did see that Soviet World War II T-34 in the opening of the show. And that was like the war-winning tank of the Soviet Union. That was like the Sherman tank was to the Western Allies. But tanks were being developed by the end of the Second World War that would change armed warfare. So this was designed in 1945 at the end of the Second World War. So that is less than 10 years. That's 9 years. 9 years, because of the conflicts and the advancements of World War II, we went from that Vickers light tank to a monster like the Soviet T-54. Now, designed at the end of the Second World War and then put into mass production in the 1950s. Now, the Soviet Union, when the Cold War started, this was the tank that terrified the West, that terrified the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and all the NATO allies. The Soviets were producing so many of these massive tanks, like the T-54 and the T-55. And their armored doctrine was to swarm the enemy, an advancement past the interwar tanks. We have massive sloped frontal armor. That is meant not for fighting infantry. That terrifies infantry. That's meant for defending themselves against other tanks and armored vehicles. A massive 90mm main weapon. Can you imagine how large the shell is of that? You know, you had that little Vickers machine gun with just belt-fed ammunition, and now you have shells that are about this long. They advanced. We had just a driver and one other crew person who was the gunner, the commander, the communications person in the vehicle. And from lessons of the Second World War, we've now moved to having many more people in the vehicle. We have the driver, we have the crew commander, we have the loader. That person's job is just looking after the ammunition. And then we actually have another person deep in the belly of the vehicle who is the gunner. They're actually controlling the turret movement, and getting that gun on target to other main battle tanks inside the vehicle. The machine gun you see there is a Dishka machine gun. It can be used for suppressing infantry around the tank and also in an anti-aircraft role. But this is the tank that started an era of what we now call the main battle tanks. And we'll see that evolution in Allied tanks when we get to the next segment, because we have all parts of that evolution. So their driver here, let's point out that our crew member. Driver here is Mihai. Mihai is our Soviet and Eastern Bloc vehicle specialist and mechanic. And he is a retired serving officer of the Romanian army, and they were using a lot of this Soviet equipment. So let's hear from Mihai and the crew of the T-54. We have a lot of talent that comes from all over the world here to keep these vehicles running, especially when they're foreign vehicles. Okay, now let's look at Allied evolution from the Second World War to today. Because there was the scare tactic, that there was the vehicle that terrified Western planners. And again, I couldn't show you the Russian tank before that, the T-34, because it seems that they're having a mechanical issue. So we're going to send the T-54 around again for you to really enjoy. Get a look at that. This particular one, you can see that it's not painted green, it's painted tan. And that's because it's used in desert warfare. This vehicle was actually captured in 1991. It was part of the Iraqi armed forces in the first Gulf War. Soviets not only massively produced it for their own armies, but every client state. And don't be concerned about the smoke, because Russian vehicles just smell like that, okay? All right, let's have a look at the evolution of Allied vehicles. So we're going to go back to the Second World War. This time the Sherman's running, so we don't have to worry about not making that comparison. So this is an M4A2E8, or what's known as the EZ-8 Sherman. So these Shermans came out at the end of 1944. The Sherman had been a tank on the battlefield in the Second World War, mostly American production. Canada did produce an earlier version of the Sherman, but Sherman tanks came out in 1942, and they were considered a medium battle tank. In the Second World War, after we got past that interwar period, there was of two of our operational Shermans. This is Billy. And in the Military Vehicle Conservation Center, you can see Bart on display there, or you can go check out Billy in the tank harbor after the show. So, we were talking about that massive gun. With the development of both armor and firepower within the Second World War and to today. So, this Sherman has a 76mm main weapon, the size of that main gun in the turret. It also is bristling with machine guns, and I'm going to point them out to you when we bring it up front. With the Sherman for the Western Allies, for Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, and all other allies, this was So the Sherman was unique in that it had a 5-person crew. And as I said, it was bristling with machine guns. So again, you have this massive 76mm weapon. By 1944, when we had the 76mm, it could penetrate the armor and take out almost any other tank on the battlefield. You had a Tiger, a Panther, not on the frontal armor, but if you're a skillful Sherman crew, you could take out almost any other armored vehicle on the Second World War battlefield with this Sherman. Bristling with machine guns. So up on top, you can see we have the 50 caliber machine gun. What you saw in that modern Sandcat, we've been using the 50 caliber machine gun for a very long time. So the same gun, the Second World War Sherman up top. Here at the front, and we have this position here. This is the bow gunner. So there's a ball turret machine gun right here at the front of the tank. And this operator, that's again for suppressing infantry, giving extra firepower on the vehicle. Turreted vehicles have something called a coaxial machine gun. What does that mean? Just above the driver, there's a 30 caliber machine gun that is built into the mantlet that aims wherever the main gun aims. Kind of like this. So the gunner can decide, if he hears something coming, he goes around the corner, and it's not another tank, it's just a truck, he can decide not to waste the round of the main gun and instead can use the coaxial machine gun. So 3 machine guns, a 76mm weapon, lots of very robust vehicle, and again I'll go over the crew positions. So we have our driver, we have our co-driver and bow machine gunner. We have the tank commander. We have the loader. Okay, that's a hard job, Gabe, very hard job. And then again, you can't see it, but down in the hall here, in the body of the tank, there's another person sitting down there that is controlling where that gun goes. So a 5-person crew. So the tank that won the Second World War for us, but we're going to see how this turned into what we use now, a main battle tank. So that's it for the Sherman. Let's hear it for the crew of the Sherman. So we talk about special vehicles. What's coming out right now is the only running example in Canada, and it's even around the world is becoming more rare to have these tanks operational. So the next generation of tank after the Second World War was the main battle tank, and I'll explain that when it gets here. This is a Centurion Mark V. Just like that T-54, it was developed right at the end of the Second World War. Just was being delivered to the battlefield in Europe at the end of the war in 1945, but then went into mass production and upgrades in the 1950s and became the main battle tank of the United Kingdom and Commonwealth forces. It was also used by many other So, with the development of those very large tanks at the end of the Second World War, you think about the Tiger and the Panther, they're actually also considered to be prototypes or early MBTs or main battle tanks. And so the British, as well as the Americans with the Pershing, and the Russians with the T-54, they moved away from that light, medium, and heavy tank, and they put all of their production and their new armored doctrine into creating main battle tanks. So one tank that can do all roles. One tank that is designed to defeat anything else it comes up against on the battlefield. It doesn't have a specialized role. It's not an infantry fighting tank, or an anti-tank tank, or an amphibious tank. It is a main battle tank. That's what we have here with the Centurion. Now, what's the flag that is flying on top of the Centurion? What is it? So, again, in gunnery, main battle tanks, not all Second World War tanks, even the late war tanks, had something called a stabilization system, or a stab. What is that? That's the ability to lock your gun onto a target. No matter where the vehicle goes, the gun stays level with the target. A huge advancement. It kind of works like this. No matter where I move, that gun stays on the target. Huge advancement in technology. The armor is thicker. It's about 15 tons heavier than that Easy 8 Sherman. And the weapons, this is a 20-pounder. It's about a 90-millimeter main weapon. So we went from 76-millimeter to 90-millimeter. Again, the armor is getting thicker. The guns are getting more deadly. But by this point, we found out that we didn't need that fifth person. So you'll notice on the Centurion, we still have the 3 turret crew, right? The commander, the loader, and the gunner. But there's no co-gunner. There's no bow machine gun on the front of the vehicle. We just have a driver. They've eliminated that one crew position. So we're very proud of this vehicle. This vehicle here was a gate guard. What is a gate guard? A gate guard is like those tanks that you see on the lawn. They're beautiful ornaments, right? You see them outside of armories and legions across the country. It's a big monument. So over a period of 10 years, the volunteers here turned a gate guard into the only operational Centurion tank in Canada. Let's hear it for the crew and the dedication in keeping history alive. So the Shermans were being retired. Also, they have other capabilities that those early Second World War tanks didn't have, like a pivot gear. What's a pivot gear? The ability to have your vehicle in place just spin. One track moving one direction, one track moving the opposite direction. So to be able to put that strong frontal armor of your main battle tank towards the enemy once you know which direction the enemy is there without having to lose your position or change your position. So another huge advancement from that first generation to the second generation of these main battle tanks. I'm the executive director. I work here, and I am as giddy as a school kid every time I see this thing. Let's hear it for the Centurion again, guys. Come on. You just do not see this anymore. All right, Centurion crew, roll out. generation of the Leopard tanks and other vehicles in this generation, like the American M1 Abrams, the British Chieftain, into the conflicts of today. So again, being a proper main battle tank, it has that 4-person crew. But now let's look at the main weapon. Yes, it has advanced stabilization. Stabilization that is actually laser guided. Okay, on the front of the turret, you can actually see there's a lens that is pinging out. You can actually target, you can get wind speed, air, the distance to the target, and then you can lock on the stabilization to the target with your main gun. We now went from the 76 millimeter, the 90 millimeter. This is a 105 millimeter main weapon. So as time goes on, the guns get bigger. The technology gets faster. But something changed here with the Leopard. By this point, tanks had become so powerful that it was decided that really it's the tank that has the technology to see the other tank and fire first and is going to win in a tank-on-tank battle. So when developing the Leopard, they actually sacrificed some of the armor. It's still heavily armored, but they sacrificed some of the armor of the other main battle tanks to give this more maneuver. Now, when it moves, and again, when it goes by you, you hear that sound? It almost is like, it's not just the ground that's shaking under the bleacher, right? It's almost like the air is vibrating. This engine is so powerful, it is actually vibrating the air around it when it's going past you. So again, when it starts going past you on the parade, you're gonna hear that sound. But it's almost like you can feel it in your lungs, and that's not the fumes, that's just the vibrations in the air around the vehicle. It's such an incredible, powerful machine and such a fast engine. So this is one of 6 of our Leopard tanks. We have many different variants, Canadian variants. This one here is a Belgian Army variant, the Leopard BE-1A5. And you're going to see this tank again in the show finale. This is going to be one of the MBTs going to battle in the Battle Royale simulated tank battle. Okay, let's get them back to position. So, at the front of the vehicle, you see those 2 caps on either side of the mantle. One mantlet. One of those is actually the coaxial machine gun. The other is the sight. And that box right there in front of the tank commander, you can see it has that periscope. That is the box that has, infrared, night vision, the laser, and all that amazing technology that makes this that next 4th generation of tanks and 3rd generation of main battle tanks. Now let's hear it for the Leopard demonstration crew. I definitely am feeling it right here. Okay, so now that you know what these vehicles are, and you've learned a bit about their development, we're going to do a parade lap for you again. Let's run the parade lap. And you can see in front of you the evolution of these vehicles. So first, we're going to bring out the 3 Western vehicles all at once, so you can actually see in front of you that evolution. 21st century. We have the German-built Leopard-made battle tank, the Leopard 1A5, definitely the fastest made battle tank ever produced. All right, Allied tanks, roll out. It's very rare. This is why we came up with this evolution show, to see this evolution in front of you and then actually experience the sounds, the smells of these vehicles and how they operate. tanks today that will decide who wins that battle. Are you guys ready for that? Okay. Marshall, send out the tanks. Our first contender is a main battle tank you haven't yet met yet, of the same era of the Leopard 1. This is an American built by Chrysler M60A3 Patton main battle tank. One of the heaviest main battle tanks in the Canadian Tank Museum's collection. And roaring down the back stretch is the Challenger, the Belgian Leopard 185. So, I'm going to tell you about the strengths and weaknesses of these two contemporary main battle tanks. And then, from what you've learned today, after the battle, you're going to decide. You're going to not vote for your favorite tank. You're going to vote for the crew inside the tank and how they performed with their equipment. How did they maximize the strengths of their tank and exploit the weaknesses of the enemy tank? How did they get on target? How many shots did they get on target on the enemy tank? How did they use the features in the tank arena for cover and to outmaneuver their enemy? So here I said we had the M60 main battle tank. Different from the Leopard, it's 10 tons heavier. So the M60 is a slower tank than the Leopard. That's its weakness. It has a 105 millimeter main weapon, the exact same ammo, the exact same firepower of the Leopard main battle tank. Its advantage is in its thick armor. That extra weight gives it that extra protection. Look at the front glacis plate of this M60 main battle tank. Any shot by the Leopard on that front glacis plate would not penetrate with a 105. So again, when the Leopard is firing at the M60, look at how the M60 crew, despite their slower speed, is positioning themselves for maximum protection against a faster enemy. And any shots against this front plate by the Leopard should not count. Now the Leopard, again, 105 millimeter main weapon, same firepower as the M60. Its armor is much thinner. It might be able to get a hit on the front glacis plate and not penetrate, but most likely will. Any shot by the M60 into the engine deck or into the thinner side armor of this tank would be a destabilizing hit on the Leopard by the M60. But its strength is in its maneuverability and speed. You saw how quickly it turned it was pivoting. You saw how fast it can move around the tank arena. So it's going to use its speed to get into a firing position faster than the M60. So again, you won't be voting for your favorite tank, the German-built Leopard 1 or the American-built M60. You will be voting for the best crew and how they outfought and outwitted their opponents in Battle Royale. Does that sound interesting? Sorry, I gotta turn that way up. Are you guys ready for Battle Royale? Now, I'm getting off the tank arena for this. It's going to be loud. It's going to be fast. Again, the drivers, highly trained drivers, they are hatched down, operating their vehicle from what their crew commander is telling them over the radio and what they can see through those small vision blocks. So I'm going to be in a safe location. I will narrate, give you some hints at what I see and how the crews did, but it will ultimately come back here, and it'll come back to you guys on who wins Evolution Battle Royale. Take your firing. difficult for these tanks to get a decent hit on each other's turrets. Leopard speeding down back of the tank arena. M60 escaping the trap. Leopard has a great opportunity. second Battle Royale of Tank Season 2025 back in May. The Leopard crew actually won the May Battle Royale. We keep a tab throughout the year, and there's actually a championship. So, I saw a lot of good stuff today, especially, in my opinion, from the way these guys operate their tank. But we want to know, based on what you've seen, what you've learned today, who do you think won Battle Royale? And again, you're not going to be voting on the crew individually, unless they're a family member. You're not voting for your favorite tank. You're voting for the crew and how they perform. So here we have the driver. We have Nick King, Canadian Armed Forces veteran, longtime member of the museum. On top of the commander there, we have Al. Al's been a long-time volunteer. You can see he's the marshal who's usually commanding the ride station. And we have Connie. Connie up there as the assistant loader, a newer volunteer. Okay. Now, it's not all male crew and drivers. As you can see, the M60 team also has a female crew member. We have Ashley who's the driver. So, this is how it works. With applause, shouting, nothing rude, please. Applause, shouting, and clapping. You try to make as much noise for the tank that you believe won Battle Royale. So, by applause, who believes the M60 crew won Battle Royale? Okay. By applause, who believes the Leopard crew won Battle Royale? All right. I gotta take these off. Again, by applause, M60 crew. And by applause, the Leopard crew. M60 has the June Battle Royale. Let's hear it for both crews. An amazing demonstration, an amazing educational show with Maine battle tanks. So, again, I am the executive director of the museum, Jeremy Blowers. Thank you for coming out to Tank Saturday Evolution. Now, we welcome you back to Aquino Tank Weekend. Check out the website. We have multiple Tank Saturday events like this one. How can you help the museum? By leaving a review. Tell a friend. Leave a review on Facebook, TripAdvisor, Google. Please tell the world about the success of the Canadian Tank Museum, the time you had here, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you very much.